Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I want to talk about where to start a historical swordsmanship study. Okay, and the answer to that is wherever you can. Okay, now a lot of people will sometimes, just start by looking at manuals, and they won't progress any further than that, or they will progress very slowly from that point. And what I mean by that is that they'll study the manuals, they'll spend a whole bunch of time studying different manuals, but they will go to practices like very sparingly. Like in many cases, I see that people will, typically go like maybe one or two main events, like per year. Okay, like a big name event that there'll be well-known speakers at, uh, and that will be the main focus of their study. Okay, now the thing to understand with these manuals, these historical manuals that have come down to us. Okay, uh, they were intended for people that already knew how to fight. Okay, you know, just growing up, in the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th century, or pretty much in any time period, prior to the last 200 years. Okay, people grew up with sword combat, and it's something that they would have been exposed to throughout the course of their life. Okay, kind of like like today, pretty much everybody grows up with some concept of baseball or basketball or soccer. Everybody understands some, like everybody knows what a field goal is, what a home run is. Like even if you like, I really don't follow baseball. I don't follow hockey. I don't follow any of these professional sports. I'm only interested in combat sports. Okay. Um, you know but even though I don't really follow any of these these popular um, sports, I know something about them. I know what a touchdown is. I know what a slam dunk is. And the reason is because just throughout the course of my life, I've been exposed to it. I've seen it on at various times, on television, or in person. People playing at a playground or something. They're playing basketball or something. So I've been exposed to it throughout the course of my life. So I know something about it. I know how people are supposed to move when they're dribbling a basketball. I know how people are supposed to move when they're playing hockey. I have so the point is that if you grew up, let's say in the 10th, 11th, 12th century, you knew something about swords. You knew how they were supposed to move. You knew, you had seen how they were used. Okay, so these historical manuals were kind of written with that in mind, and furthermore, they were intended for people that had just more than a than a than an the knowledge through observation. They were intended for people who had actually been, studying it and fighting it, and they were in many cases intended to make them better fighters or better fencers. Okay, so that's who these manuals were intended to. Kind of almost think of it as the icing on the cake. Okay, so these techniques were intended to give you an edge. Okay, but people already knew how to fight before they got to that point. So that's why I think it is an error, okay, to approach swordsmanship from the top down, in the sense that I'm going to study all the fancy stuff in the manuals, and I'm going to all the hooks and all the different grapplings and the pummel hooks and the murder strokes and all these things. But at the same, before you get to all that, you need to know just basic movement. How to make a strike. So that's why when people ask me, like, where do you think I should start my swordsmanship, I will tell them, I mean, yeah, you can kind of look at the manuals, but don't get wrapped up into them. Get to a practice. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's like, because you have some practices that are more like instructional based, where people go there and they do drills, and they practice certain techniques. And then you got some practice where people just go there and they spar. Okay, all they're doing is they're hitting each other. And here's the thing, even if you go into a practice where people are just sparring, you will still learn some things. Okay, you will still learn something about movement, timing, distance, and just by talking to you, you'll start to understand more things than if you were just sitting at home, looking at manuals and at a computer screen at these images from like 500-600 years ago. Okay. And I'll tell you guys where I started out. I mean, I wanted to start here. I wanted to start with the German longsword because I had seen this is before YouTube, so I hadn't seen any videos, right? YouTube didn't exist yet. I had seen some web pages, right, where people had a couple of images of the longsword and maybe a couple of pictures of them, because they didn't have really too many videos back then. They had a few images of people using this. I said, wow, that's really cool. I want to learn how to use this. So I started looking around trying to find a place where I can study this, and I could not find anything near me. Okay, so the best that I could do, okay, was find a local fencing school, and I started off with these things, with an épée and a saber. Okay, this is where I started out. And I did this for 6 months, and I learned a lot. I learned how to move. I learned proper fencing steps. I learned something about distance, about timing, about being balanced, moving around the balanced way. So there was a lot to be learned just from this. Okay. Now here's the interesting thing: that while I was at this practice, I made contacts and I learned about other organizations that I was not able to find at the time, because again the internet had been around for a while, but it wasn't like you could like, it was before YouTube. A lot of the different fencing schools had not become developed. I mean, nowadays, yeah, there's a HEMA school in almost every there's a HEMA school within 2-3 hours for anybody. Okay, back then it really wasn't that common. So I started off here with this, and while I was at this fencing school, I became aware of the SCA and their rapier program. So from here, okay, within a month of learning about the SCA, I went over there and I started basically learning how to fence with a rapier. Okay, and basically that moved me forward even more. Okay, because now we're using a steel blade. It's more historical. So that moved me forward from there. And at the same time, well, that's it. Once I got into the SCA, I should say, within a month, right, which is relatively the same time, I learned through the SCA, I learned about a HEMA group that was relatively close to me. Okay, and I also joined that simultaneously. Okay, and also while at the same time, I also learned about the armored combat that they do in the SCA, where basically they're hitting at full power, full speed. They're using wooden simulators, but they are hitting at full power and full speed. So I also got into that. So one kind of brought the other, and back then, this is back when I was much younger than I am now. I was doing 3 practices a week. I was doing a rapier practice, I was doing a HEMA practice, and I was also doing an SCA armored combat practice. Okay, so 3 practices a week, plus going to the gym, 3 times a week. So I was training really hard. Okay, that's before I had kids and family and stuff like that. Now I had to slow down a little bit. But the point is, I was doing stuff. I wasn't just sitting home looking at manuals, trying to figure out what they were saying. I was out there, interacting with people, getting different ideas, sparring, and that's the best way to proceed. Now, not everything that I learned was correct, okay? Because wherever you go, you're going to hear different opinions. You're going to hear, you're going to hear contradicting opinions, and that's fine, because basically I was able to absorb all this, kind of store it in the back of my mind, and then eventually I was able to kind of sort it out, and cross-reference it myself. And then from that point, like when I wanted to sort out what was correct as far as historical swordsmanship, I was able to kind of go back to the manuals and say, okay, well, now I have some experience. I know how to make it cut. I know how to move. I understand distance and timing. So now when I look at the now again, we're going back now some 13, 14 years. At that point, after I had actually been sparring and getting some basic instruction, once I had been getting that for 2 years, at that point, I was able to kind of go back to the historical manuals, go back to the original sources, and look at the translations, because you really, in order to really understand it, you have to kind of learn the original language and read it, as it was originally written. So I'm still a step away because I'm reading the translations. But the point is, I'm able to read the translations and understand what they mean, because now I have some experience to compare that by. Okay, so that's one of the things I wanted to put out. The manuals were intended for people that knew how to swing a sword, that knew how to move, how to get in and out of distance. Okay, so as far as like how to move forward in studying HEMA, don't just wrap your head, in a book or in a computer screen. Go out there, practice, go to as many different practices as you can, and get as many different perspectives. And from one practice to the other, the different instructors and the people there will have different perspectives, and in many cases they will be contradicting, and that's fine. Absorb as much as you can, and then once you have all that information, then go sort it out. Then you can go back to the manuals and say, okay, well, he said this, and she said that, and he said that. What does the manual say now? Okay, what seems the most close to what of all the things I've heard, what seems to fit what the manuals say, and then you can take that, and then you can go out and spar and test it out, and all these good things. So that's how I think. That's what I think is a good way to proceed with your study of historical swordsmanship. Okay, but those are my thoughts on that. That's basically my life experience in studying historical swordsmanship. If you guys have any questions or any comments, or if you want to share your experiences, I'd love to hear from you. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and if you're not a member of the channel, please subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.